the particularly hard part is people listening to those pigs like screaming for their lives, literally screaming. Like it's literally horrifying. It's probably the most haunted thing that I've ever experienced in my entire life. You hear bangs, and then you hear like slaughterhouse workers mocking them, laughing at them, singing.
All right, you want me to do number one on the list of questions?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, cool. All right. So I'll just say for the listeners, these are questions that I sent you in advance. I have seen animals slaughtered in front of my eyes, face to face. I have seen chickens and pigs being slaughtered, etc. However, I've never participated in the types of protests you've been doing on your YouTube channel lately. I've never stood in front of the gates of a slaughterhouse. I've never participated in this type of vigil. Around the world, they're called Pig Save and other things. There's sort of a style of protest right now. As you've now done that repeatedly, and you've reflected on how your feelings change. So I've heard you say that it doesn't feel the same the first time as it does the second time. It doesn't feel the same the second time as the fifth time. What do you think that's leading toward for you, emotionally or politically? I think the slaughterhouse gate is a sort of powerful symbol for vegans. But when you think about the next 5 years of your life, what is that going to mean for you? And, where does that take you?
It was kind of just in my head that I'd seen footage. It was very bad. And chances are it was probably that bad in like the UK, but I didn't know, etc. And there was like a missing connection. And when I decided to go to the pig saves, that was like basically the last connection of I'm literally in my hometown. Like there's no denying it anymore. This is actually real. There's no kind of way I can convince myself that somehow magically it's different. And it's just it's literally haunting. And the reason I keep going to these pig saves is because if people understand the same kind of understanding that I had, and they get rid of the whole mentality of like, oh no, it's different where I'm from, like we're more humane here. That's what we need to happen, because I've said it a million times, like it's all well and good watching this footage, but it actually doesn't affect some people. Like people can watch it and be like, whatever, like okay, I get it, but probably not like that here, etc. So for me, that's one of the most important things we can do, and I think everyone needs to do it, because say for example in 5 years time, it's people are going to remember that. They're not going to remember some argument that two people had on YouTube. They're going to remember something that started to try and save these animals. And people have been saying like it's a really stupid name to call it Pig Save. Yeah, fair play, like we're not saving them. I wish we could, but we're saving future pigs, and that's why I don't mind the name. I think the name's good.
Yeah, well,
it's having like a future mentality to it. The fact that in the future we will be saving animals.
Yeah, obviously I have no objection to the name Pig Save. You got to come up with a name that's short and easy to refer to. Yeah. I assume in England you encounter a lot. I've lived in the UK, but years ago. I assume you encounter a lot this attitude of if it's local meat, it's okay.
Oh yeah, because we see loads. Like you'll never see pigs, you'll never see chickens, you'll never see like turkeys or anything like that. The only thing we see in the UK is cows. Like we see a few cows on fields, and I had the mentality that that's the beef that I eat and that's the steak, etc. But people really can't quite grasp that those animals are very few and far between. Like they're not the like, animals you think you're eating. They're not roaming free range, etc. And even in that case, the second they step through, like they get through those doors at the slaughterhouse, it's just hell for them. It's absolutely horrifying. But every single animal, chickens aren't stupid, cows aren't stupid, pigs aren't stupid.
Their lives aren't great before they get to the slaughterhouse. I mean, it's misery from birth till death for them. I mean,
Oh yeah.
But sorry, I'm not disagreeing with you that it's misery in the slaughterhouse. But that's, I mean, so two thoughts come to mind there. One, you're talking about the vigils as actually, convincing people of how real this is and how it pertains to their lives where they live. But are there non-vegans coming with you? I mean, because you're describing that as if...
People have started coming, because there was an article in like a local newspaper saying that we're encouraging people, we're like challenging people to come along to this and see where your meat's from, etc. And And the particularly hard part is people listening to those pigs like screaming for their lives, literally screaming. Like it's literally horrifying. It's probably the most haunting thing that I've ever experienced in my entire life, easily, because it's even scary because you can't see behind you can't see behind it. You can just hear like ear-piercing screams, and you can hear bangs, and then you hear like slaughterhouse workers mocking them, laughing at them, singing. It's really sick. It's just a really sick thing. So when non-vegans come to that, it either hits them extremely hard, or they find a way to block it out. And that was what I did on the first slaughterhouse. I don't know how I did it, but just like literally nothing affected me. I was listening and it just didn't register.
No,
I don't feel any emotion.
That's interesting, because I mean, I have to say, like, coming from Canada, I can't imagine someone attending one of those events if they aren't already committed to veganism or animal rights. You know what I mean? Like, I can't, like, in this culture, I can't imagine someone having a moderate position where they say, okay, like, they still eat meat, but they're willing to come and win. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can see it being something really powerful for anyone who's in that position where they're willing to do that. But I think that must be very rare. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, well, it is and it isn't, because I don't know, there has been a few people that have come that are non-vegans, and it's also helped, like, the people around them, because A, you're causing problems just by your mere presence to the surrounding area, and B, you're making the locals like turn around and be like, right, okay, we should probably address this, and C, you're actually making locals realise that exists, because so many of them don't. The only ones, I mean, we have a placard that says "Honk, Mercy for Pigs," I think it said, and I couldn't believe how many people were actually like beeping, and I don't know whether it's like 50% people just doing it for the sake of it, or 50% people who like are probably vegetarian or vegan and really don't like what's going on, or even meat eaters. And we had two white van men just screaming bacon. It's quite an interesting experience. So I don't know what the outcome's going to be, but I think it can only be positive, to be honest.
It's gauche to compare everything to the Holocaust, but at the end of World War II, there was an interesting program that came up spontaneously. It's just Americans and others who were occupying specific towns in Germany. They got pissed off with local Germans who didn't believe the Holocaust happened, like it had just happened 5 months earlier or whatever, like it was still fresh history. And there were incidents. I know of one outside of Weimar in Germany where they rounded up local people basically at gunpoint and said, you're going to come and visit the concentration, you're going to see it. And Weimar is one of the places where there was a concentration camp down the street, like it wasn't far away. So again, it's this weird quality slaughterhouses have. Back when I had a blog, not like before I was on YouTube, and I was living in France, blog about veganism, I remember, in response to this locally slaughtered myth, like, why would it be better if it's local? If it's imported from the United States or from Mexico or from Spain, why would that have an ethical difference? To me, that's such a weird illusion. But I remember I posted maps of France showing the slaughterhouses, just using like a Google Maps type of thing. Like all the slaughterhouses that are listed in the phone book, which isn't even all the slaughterhouses. And it's like, they're everywhere. There are so many slaughterhouses. Like, I can't say all meat is locally slaughtered meat. It's possible you're buying imported meat. You can choose to. But like, this is a mass part of our economy where no matter where you're living, even if you're, living in a remote part of Canada, if you just look it up, if you just look up where your nearest slaughterhouse is, like, obviously this is not an ethical difference. But anyway, I was just going to say, I've seen film footage, not of the people being killed in the concentration camps. I've probably seen that too. But when these Germans were forced to visit the concentration camps, you could see the changes in their expressions from the beginning to the end. And that was after the camp had been shut down, but there were still, signs, still things like piles of human shoes, and it's a little thing, but it gets to you. You know what I mean? Same with the animals. It can be piles of hoofs or piles of skulls or whatever. Something that gives you a sense of the scope of it. And
when you see the entrails, like the pig's intestines, everything, they have like a massive, it's like a bulldozer kind of thing. and they just like pour all the entrails into this massive metal container. And it's just like it's just really harrowing. I can't even put it into words. I really wish I could, but it's just harrowing.
Yeah. Anyway, look, I mean, I think some people, at least, and again, I don't know, like, even with the Holocaust, some percentage of those Germans went home and were still assholes about it and didn't learn the lesson, but some percentage did. Like I say, there've got to be at least 5% of people who are intelligent enough, sensitive enough to care. I just say one final thing on that. You know, I agree, the spectacle of thousands of pigs being killed or thousands of cow skulls or whatever, that's one thing. But, like, I lived in a small town in Laos. I lived in several. There's one in particular I'm thinking of where the whole village, the whole town, only killed one pig a day. And it's basically out of extreme poverty, basically, you know, long story short. And, you know, of course, many people would regard that as a very positive thing. Like, oh, you know, obviously compared to the Western world, this is so much less meat being consumed by this village. And I remember, so you had to wake up there, like, I'm probably lowballing it. I was going to say 4:30 in the morning. You had to wake up at like 3:30 in the morning, 4 in the morning, in order to buy food at all at the morning market there. It was hell. I mean, anyway, hey, that's whatever. These are real third world conditions. And obviously the farmers bringing the food. And if you went at that early hour, you would see the one wooden cart coming with the one, you know, chopped up pig that was killed for that day. And you would see the people come to buy it. Now, again, in terms of the poverty within this town, not everyone could afford pig meat. And I remember, so obviously in this town, I was the only white man. I was the only person who spoke English. It's kind of needless to say. But while I was staying there, briefly, a German woman visited. She was writing her PhD on geography. So, you know, bizarrely, a German showed up in this town. So we, you know, said hi and chatted for a bit. And we're talking about different aspects of the local economy. And, you know, completely sincerely, without premeditation, I said, oh yes, well, you know, if you wake up at 4 in the morning, if you wake up at this really early time and go to the market, you know, you can see the local rich people showing up in their, you know, fancy dresses in order to buy, you know, the dismembered pieces of this one pig. You know, I had to catch myself because it wasn't even something I was meaning to say, but there was, you know, so much hatred and contempt in my voice for, you know, the rich in this village. And the reality is those rich people, they were living on like $1 a day cash salary, you know, like $30 in that village. Those would be the rich people. Like if their household is $30, but, you know, and, you know, I remember it was just like a wake up moment for me, but it's true. Nevertheless, I did feel that contempt for them. And, you know, even when it's just one pig, you know, when you're seeing that, anyway, I just say it can still have that impact when it's the one pig having its throat cut and bleeding to death, because among other things, it's completely unnecessary. This is a, you know, cultural ritual being held so people can poison themselves. But yeah, that one was a wake up call for me. All right, question 2. Unintentional segue here. Although some people say my channel is quite rational, I spend quite a lot of time thinking about the emotional and irrational aspects of veganism. I think that rational ideas can lead to unexpected and irrational results. Okay, in that subjective sense, do you wonder about the ways in which being vegan is changing you or changing your life? Do you think that some of the changes were unpredictable? You read that question before. You can take that any way you want to take it, but I think both of us, we talked about, in answer to question 1, in some ways the sort of warping, unexpected effects that these things have on us, like psychologically or emotionally or whatever you want to say. I'm guessing some of the changes in the past have been unpredictable for you, and looking ahead, I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. So just the idea that I'm vegan in general, like, was completely completely confusing to everyone around me, to myself as well. It wasn't really. It seemed like the most logical, easiest decision to make, because I've always been an animal lover. I've always called myself an animal lover. Always felt more connected to animals than humans. Probably shouldn't say that because it makes me sound like a human hater, but that alone was really confusing and really kind of crazy, and it took me on a massive tangent of, it's just so weird. I don't know how to explain it. It was like a 180, and my entire life just like switched in on itself. and I stopped I lost a lot of what can you call it, like selfish thoughts, selfish kind of needs, which was nice. Like it's nice not to constantly be obsessed with yourself and obsessed with like issues revolving around yourself essentially. But from then on, like everything's just been about veganism, about animals, about that's all I see everywhere. Like in films, I think about the fact that there's horrific treatment of animals in films, like horrifying. All you have to do is Google it and you find out loads of crazy shit. And then, so that ruins most movies for me. When I look around, when I drive to Yorkshire, I see just something I never noticed before was the amount of slaughterhouses on the way. It's just disgusting. And they're hidden so well, like really cleverly. There's like big bushes, trees, everything covering them. And it's just this kind of, I feel like, I spoke to someone today about it, and it feels like, you feel like a psycho, you feel like everyone's on some kind of drug and you're the only one that isn't on the drug. And it's just like, can you not see how crazy this is? This is horrifying. And then because I have a psychology background, I can understand it, and that's even more infuriating. Because I feel crazy, but I also feel sane.
Yeah, I mean, it's an issue that's everywhere and nowhere. And I mean, this is kind of almost a trivial comparison, but it is weird to me because I've talked to other vegans who've been to Thailand and the same places in Thailand I've been. And they say to me, like, what are you talking about? There's poverty there. There's prostitution there. Like the different social issues where they actually don't see it, and that's very alien to me also. Like even within my own family, I grew up in downtown Toronto and we have poverty and prostitution downtown Toronto. It's not one of the worst cities in the world for anything. It's not famous for it, but it's there if you're willing to see it. And I really was kind of aware of that difference. In some ways, it's not there unless you're looking for it, or you don't see it if you're looking for it. But I mean, with the meat industry, I mean, it's not possible to have meat on every shelf of every grocery store unless, there's a slaughterhouse every few square miles. You know what I mean? But anyway, the feelings you're talking about, though, I mean, I guess what I'm asking you here is, I mean, looking ahead like 5 years or something, I don't know, like suffering changes you, that awareness changes you. But I mean, that's kind of what I think about. I even worry about it with myself, is where does that take me? I mean, like obviously there's a conversion period, there's a discovery period when you first figure this stuff out. But then, I don't know, how do you live with that, or what happens 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road?
I think it's just going to be a repeat of everything that's been happening, just kind of like these waves of feeling like good about things, doing certain things, feeling a certain way, and then there's just like a crash where I'm burnt out and I can't like emotionally grasp all of it, and I just want to hide. Like I just want to stay in my room, stay under my covers, and just like not be able to think about anything. So I think it's just going to be like constantly doing that. Hopefully I'll see some good improvements, especially in the Western world, because I've noticed that a lot of other countries always just follow the Western world. So as long as we sort as much out as we can here, then everything should follow in place. Israel's doing amazingly, actually. Yeah,
I know. That's bizarre. I'd like to know more about it. A lot of the statistics about Israel are nonsense, but the 7% one is not. It's a real survey study that 7% are vegan there. And that shows up in terms of the number of vegan restaurants in the streets and everything. So for them to go from 0 to 7 in one generation is a huge accomplishment. Yeah, but I mean, Israel is a totally foreign country to me. I've never been there.
Yeah,
but I really don't know what the factors are.
I only know Israel through Palestine because some of my friends are Palestinian, so I've always had like a negative view of Israel. But it's only since veganism that I've seen kind of the positives of the younger generation in regards to like animals and liberation of animals.
Well, I mean, the negative aspects of Israel are so obvious that they're not worth mentioning. But I mean, what always struck me as strange is that what Israel and Taiwan have in common is being ultra militarized. You know what I mean? Like everyone in Israel has done military service. Taiwan, it's not everyone, but it's also, they're constantly ready to have a war with China. Like for such a small country, a huge percentage of their economy is going into military preparedness all the time. And you hear the jets, the army jets constantly. The videos on this channel from back when I was living in Taiwan, they're interrupted by army jets going over it, and I was living nowhere. So I don't know, in some weird sense, I wonder if there's a connection there. Again, psychologically or culturally, where it's just like, well, our whole culture is about violence and is about necessary violence. you know, and then thinking about what's necessary violence and what's not, and what positive changes you can make in your life. I mean, there are only 2 examples in the whole world. But I've mentioned before on this channel, when I was in Taiwan, it did strike me that I was meeting so many guys, macho guys who were ex-military, and who had either killed men with their bare hands or who had at least had the training, who became vegan, you know, when they left the military. So that was striking to me. And again, you know, I can see it. I can connect the dots where it's like, okay, I know what necessary violence is like, so I know what unnecessary violence is like. So I can move to eliminate it. Look, it's no big deal. I had noted here under this heading, because I mean, you know, any of these questions you can take whatever way you want to take it. But you know, when I was in Germany, I was very, very sick and needed medicine. And when I first became vegan, and I can remember not only saying this about myself, but answering questions from other people about this. People used to ask me, like on my blog, was it okay to take medicine that's not vegan? And, you know, I would refer back to the original definition, you know, your British definition of vegan, you know, as much as practical and possible, et cetera. And say, no, of course, you know, if it's your health, if you can't, you know, if there's no vegan alternative and you need medicine, then use a non-vegan medicine. But, you know, when I was in Germany, I went to the pharmacy, and the pharmacy was only open for that one day because of the Christmas holidays. It was going to be closed. And the only medicine they had for me had honey as an ingredient. As a flavor. And I was there, I was speaking in German, which obviously, I mean, I don't speak terribly well, but I was at the pharmacy communicating in German. And again, it's funny because I've told 2 anecdotes like this, like I was saying before, where, you know, like emotionally, it was not rehearsed, it wasn't contrived. But I responded with such contempt to the idea that I would take medicine that included honey, you know. And whatever, I mean, 15 minutes later, I was thinking, you know, I've got to check my head on this. Like, you know, this is getting out of control. You know, I didn't say anything insulting to the pharmacist, but it was speaking in German. I was just saying, like, you've got to be joking. Like, you know, like I'm vegan, you know, as if I could possibly take, you know, this medicine. And the truth was, I mean, I say, unusual situation. I couldn't really just go to another pharmacy or go another day. I was really sick and everything was closed because of the Christmas holidays. And really that was the medicine I should have taken. And again, I recognize, I mean, honey, I don't eat honey, but it's not the same as veal or something. It's not the same as medicine made out of animal blood. But, so I just say, I mean, I think part of it is, I said in my channel a few times, different contexts, you know, one of the things you can't anticipate in your life is how suffering will change you. And that's an example of how that, the other thing before about seeing the pigs slaughtered and the one pig in the village, that also, you know, in some sense, my awareness of the way these things connect to suffering, it's not wholly rational, and I don't really appreciate the way in which it's changed me, and which I'm still changing.
I'm really weird with it now I think about it, because basically near where I live, yesterday a man stabbed I'm pretty sure it was a man who stabbed his wife to death. They haven't confirmed it, but it was basically a man stabbed a woman in a house. And I drove past about 3 times today because I had to go back and forth. And I got this really weird feeling of just like empathy, and it's just really unusual for me to like empathize with someone I have never heard of, a story so kind of out there because it's not really usual. And I was just like, is this what I've become? Like, do I actually empathize now with kind of every type of suffering imaginable? Like, can I actually put myself in that kind of position? Because I was just thinking about how horrifying it would be to have your loved one turn on you, your loved one turn on you and start stabbing you to death. And apparently they've got children, loads of stuff. And it's just like, it was just a really weird experience. And then on the opposite end of the scale, I feel like I've become really kind of misanthropic. In that I've always disliked people, and it's like it used to manifest itself in anxiety. Like I didn't like being around people. I used to have panic attacks, and then it just became like more hatred of just being around people. Everything that they do annoys me. Like people driving on the roads annoys me. So there's just like a complete, I don't know. It's like every end of the scale. I just feel, I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. Look, I mean, both of those points I can really relate to. I think it must be much different for people becoming vegan if they're nationalists or if they love the country they're from. Because obviously, like, eating meat is such a part of national culture, but it's also part of, like, what you're mentioning, whether you think of it as misanthropy or not. Like, that you perceive the majority of people in your own culture as immoral. That's a shift. Like, I've got professors I'm nice to and I like them, but they go home and eat dead pigs every day. You know what I mean? And yes, like, there's a level on, like, you know, there's no conflict between us, but it's there. There's a moral difference. And that's a moral difference between me and Canada as a concept or as a culture, as a nation. I think going through it, now I already was very dissatisfied with Canada. I kind of wanted, you know, I didn't want to be particularly Canadian. But I think that must be really different from someone who is deeply committed to English and Englishness, or Canada or Canadianness, or whatever country you come from. Because, like, you say it in terms of misanthropy, but there's also just kind of a rejection of the culture, of what the culture assumes. And that, like, a lot of people, it's precious to them to imagine that they come from a town where most people are basically good, you know? Like in village England, you know, the local bobby, and the idea that you're generally surrounded by good people. And that's a big switch to think, no, I'm generally surrounded by people who will, you know, cut the throat of a cow with no hesitation. You know, among other things, people who will participate in this, you know, horrendous cycle of industrialized, you know, mass murder for no real reason, just out of inertia.
We'll go on.
Tremendously upbeat small talk in this interview, huh?
It's just too deep. I'm so tired. It's so deep.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a little bit lighter. You know, I have a sense of attachment to more than one culture, and my life has involved several different countries. In some ways, I'm not very involved with Canadian culture at all. Do you feel that your own interests and your own concerns about veganism exist in two cultures at the same time? Do you find yourself thinking about the future of England and then contrasting it to the future in Iran or elsewhere? I ask this because I myself often think about events in parallel, about what's happening in China, what's happening in Thailand and elsewhere, in contrast to Canada.
I've had like enough of a contrasting kind of like a culture clash growing up. So I've always kind of thought about like one side of it and then the other side, and I don't worry about like Iran and in regards to veganism, because they're just going to follow the Western world, and then their government's going to try and shut that down and stop it happening. But it's like, I'm going to Iran soon actually, and it's weird to think about it, because my dad, for example, just couldn't grasp, when I went vegan, he couldn't grasp it at all. I didn't understand what was happening, didn't understand why I was doing it, thought I had an eating disorder, tried to tell me about his friend's daughter who's in hospital because she ate a certain way. And I was the most scared to tell my dad because of the culture and because of kind of, when you have an Iranian father, most times, you learn never to disobey them, never to kind of challenge them, etc. And it took a lot for me, like growing up, to try and learn to like challenge and disagree and talk back, because if he says something, then that's it. There is no reply. You just do it, or you listen and you accept it, or you say okay. So like that was the culture clash enough, having two parents from different cultures, and then thinking about it in regards to the actual whole country and the effects of that. It was kind of, I don't know, it's a bit overwhelming. It seems too confusing to try and, like, I don't know, I can't explain it.
You were speaking in the past tense about your dad just not understanding it all. Does he understand better now? Has he had some time to...
I made him watch the speech, Gary Rofsky's speech, which is what I watched. And he said, like, he was there encapsulated with it. It was so creepy. Like, he was watching his phone and, like, didn't break eye contact, didn't pause, nothing. He was just watching the speech with, like, this really, like, powerful look on his face. And I couldn't believe it, because I've tried to get him to read books before, see documentaries, not just in regards to veganism, just loads of stuff. And he just doesn't have the same kind of, like, the will or the want to just, like, sit through it or read it. So it was really shocking when he watched that, and at the end of it he was just like, yeah, I get it now, but I love eating meat. And I'm just like, oh, for fuck's sake. And he doesn't, like, he's argued with me recently, actually, saying, like, stop trying to impose your beliefs on other people, you can't do that. So I don't understand, are you saying that you don't impose your beliefs on other, like, sentient beings? And he was like, "What? No, it's different. Blah blah blah. You're not going to make friends like this. People aren't going to respect you if you act like this. Leave people to do what they want to do." And I'm just like, you can't do that, Dad. That's not how life works. If you cause harm, people should have the right to stand up for the people that you're hurting or the beings that you're hurting. So it kind of stopped there, but he didn't back down. He was just like, I don't want to be like, stop doing this. Like, you shouldn't be challenging things like this. Because basically it stemmed from my mum saying, "Oh, will you make me a cup of tea?" And I was like, "Oh, do you want soy milk then?" And she was like, "Never mind." And then and my dad was like, "You can't do that, Zahria. You can't impose your beliefs." And I'm like, "For fuck's sake, shut up."
Yeah,
That's the thing. Like, nowadays, I actually challenge. I don't like sit down and say, "Okay, I have the confidence to challenge," because nothing bad's happened. I think when we were younger, like, the bad thing that would happen is you'd get beaten the crap out of. But nowadays, you can't really beat a like fully grown woman. It's a bit...
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically not on speaking terms with my parents, and haven't been for, I don't know, decades, whatever. But we do talk about practical matters, like the fact that I'm moving out of China and so on. And they do, I mean, right now they pay my rent. I mean, I'm economically, they're paying for me to be in university now and so on. So they have, I mean, in this period of my life, they've had a positive impact on my life. Many other periods of my life, not so much. But, with my father, when he was a young man, he studied Hinduism. It's needless to say, he's not Hindu or anything else. But he did choose. I mean, he had no pressure on him. Out of anything he could have studied at university, he made a choice to study Hinduism. And that's very strange. And I think he knows it's strange. And it was mentioned during my childhood, like maybe once. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, like, it was not a secret, but it was really not something he ever talked about. So it's funny, just even that little bit of background he had, it was always there that he had this respect for vegetarianism and any kind of vow like that. The idea of on a point of honor, deciding to do something or not do something, that was there, so we could relate to it. And I mean, so on that level they get it, and there's nothing to explain for me. But I mean, obviously, like, this is the sense in which, I mean, I know people. I have friends who are scholars of Sanskrit, who are dedicated Hindu scholars, and a lot of them say to me, "No, it's completely hopeless in India, and these people worship cow milk and butter. The Hindu culture is so hung up on dairy products and so on." But definitely, in contrast to Islam or Judaism, I mean, there is no basis for veganism in Judaism. Judaism, I mean, you're probably aware, it's remarkably similar to Islam. Yeah. The two have more in common than Christianity does with either one of them. But that's definitely, I mean, if you're talking about the next 100 years, it's hard to see hope. Don't get me wrong, here, like Christian Canada, I don't see any hope here either. It's hard to see hope for significant numbers of people getting involved. But that brings, yeah.
The social change doesn't kind of, I don't think it's going to be something that we gradually see. It's just going to hit at a certain point when, like, enough things have happened and there's enough of a, I don't know, linear mentality of, like, everyone just agrees that this is wrong, unnecessary. It's kind of easy to do this because companies are doing this for us. It's obviously going to be like a part of capitalism, and it's obviously going to be like companies just providing us with certain things that would just say, okay, fine, these people are saying that it's really bad to do this, we may as well do this. So I don't know, I think it will, I can see the positive in it. I think it will actually start rolling really quickly and, like, hit really quickly, because that's just social change. That's how it works. It doesn't happen, like, gradually.
Well, it's definitely what you've mentioned a few times, the issue of imitating the West. You can see that really clearly in Asia, because in Asia, like, you can see who is a California vegan and who is a Buddhist vegan or a Taoist vegan or a traditional, like, even if they're in the same restaurant, you can look and see, okay, some people got into this by imitating the West, and some people got into this, like, by imitating their grandparents, or, a vague cultural idea that came from their grandparents. Because for most cases, like, their own grandparents will eat meat, but their grandparents shared with them the basic concept that refusing to eat meat is a good thing to do. And I'll mention like I normally I don't watch kung fu movies. I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff. But like it is true on that really basic level. You could see within Asian culture, most people's idea of their ancient past is from kung fu movies. It's not from reading sophisticated books. And well, rap groups like Wu-Tang Clan, they became vegetarian because of kung fu movies. Like literally, that was the the encounter with those ideas. So just the general idea that this is something significant to do. Yeah. All right, number 4 here. The question of justice and injustice is one of the themes your channel made me think about. I find that people often have a very sharp feeling of injustice when their bicycle gets stolen, but larger problems can be ignored for many years at a time. I don't act this way myself, but you can see people becoming really vengeful, full of hatred and rage against whoever they imagine stole their bicycle. Sometimes people wander the streets hoping to meet whoever the thief was, and so on. You know examples of this in the UK or no? This is a specific example that cuts across culture. Some vegans talk about this sense of justice as a motive for or an aspect of veganism. But for me, the parts really don't fit. It's because I think of this sense of injustice as being very short-term feeling. There's no way that you can get your bike back, and there's no specific person to blame. It seems that revenge won't really help anything, and it isn't clear what kind of justice we'd really be asking for. So how do you feel justice fits into the picture?
In regards to what? Veganism?
Yeah.
Or materialism? Veganism. I think there's a...
Well,
it's part of my nature personally to be like really justice driven. I get really angry if someone doesn't like pay for what they've done, etc. And I think you've talked about it before, that it's not just compassion that kind of fuels veganism. There's a lot of other like nastier, less positive kind of like nicer, I don't know, things that fuel veganism. And I think it's one of it. It's like this sense of injustice, and this sense that justice needs to be served, and that I've spoken to loads of people that like genuinely just don't like animals. Like they're not interested in animals, they don't like animals, but they don't wish a shit ton of harm upon them. They just leave them alone. Like that's their mentality. They don't need to be harmed, therefore they leave them alone. Like it's just a logical mentality. I think psychopaths would be really good vegans because they're quite logical people. So I think that's where it fits in. It's just, I don't know.
I mean, look, I think, before you were mentioning when you're standing in front of the slaughterhouse gates and you can hear the guys actually making cruel jokes or what have you. I mean, I think there is this question of personal responsibility or of justice, i.e. against the particular people perpetrating it. And it's both hollow and, important in this way. It has, like emotionally, it's very sharp. And, we have these videotape footage from inside slaughterhouses of particular people, kicking animals and killing them in needlessly violent ways and so on. In the UK, I know of some court cases like that, about misconduct, that kind on farms. But, I mean, on the other hand, it's hollow and it's hard to fit it into the picture. I'll leave unnamed who I'm going to speak about here because I don't know if it's true. But, one of these guys who's a leader of vegan activism, I read about him. It's like, well, at one point, he was getting into threatening like university professors who were involved with vivisection. And, it's like, well, I understand why you'd want to do that in terms of the sense of personal responsibility. But on the other hand, and, the same guy, and I can also understand in terms of the slippery slope, how, once you've kind of done one crime, it leads to another. Once you've crossed a legal line, leaving aside completely the moral line. Once you've crossed a legal line, you start to go things. And this guy was, like showing up at some guy's house where he had heard, like someone had just told him that this guy, like, poisoned local stray cats or something like that. Like something to do with stray cats or stray dogs that were on his property, which is legal, right? Like the guy had killed some stray animals on his property. And so he's showing up at this guy's house and threatening him, and again, like he doesn't really know. It's just someone told him this, yeah, maybe kids made up. So, it's funny, but I mean, I really see that issue of justice and injustice as one of the more kind of dangerous and unpredictable things. But it's also tragic. It's also tragic. I mean, it does matter. It matters that the guys working in the slaughterhouse are not carrying this out with some set of grim responsibility.
Yeah, you can't expect these people to do it nicely. It's just, and the thing is, we've actually faced something like this with the pig save, because we wanted it to be a positive thing. All we want to be there for, and what we want to tell the workers and tell the public is, we are here to be be probably the only people that are going to show these animals like a tiny, minuscule amount of love and say bye. Like just bear witness to what you're about to go through. Just say, we recognise this is going to happen to you. And it's not there to we're not there to protest. We're not there to shout at slaughterhouse workers. But we've got a small number of people that feel this urge to just scream and say things to the people, to the workers, and it's really winding people up. It was back on the last pig save I was at, because it benefits no one. Of course, all of us want to scream and shout like, you're sick fucks, like, how can you do this? How can you mock them? How can you do this? But it benefits no one, and that's where the logic needs to come into play. That you have to actually learn to control yourself. Because the thing is, when you get stupid people shouting bacon at you, we get some people that shout stuff back, and it's just pointless. There's literally no need for it. You just feel like that kind of sense of needing to do something, needing to shout, needing to kind of voice your anger, but it benefits no one at all. I don't care. You can edit that bit out. Don't
No, I mean, I just say it's the kind of contradiction that people get into, and I'm sure the guy I'm referring to, I'm sure he didn't plan. It's not like he thought, my plan for the next 10 years is to do this kind of crazy shit. I just think the point is, once you get into threatening and intimidating people, there's a slippery slope there. But yeah, for me, I mean, this issue of being so angry that your bicycle got stolen, and of literally wanting to kill the person or get revenge. People react this way.
That happened to me a few months ago. This woman, I was going to what are those people called? The physio. Sorry, my friend was going to a physio for her back. She was in a car accident, and I thought I was parking in the right car park, but there was two car parks next to each other, and it turned out I was parking in the wrong car park. Anyway, this woman blocks me in intentionally. There was somewhere else she could park, but she intentionally blocks me in. I get back to my car, see that she's blocked me in, so I go into I think it was like a law firm or something. I go in and I was like, excuse me, are you parked in front of my car? And she was like, yeah, I am. And I was like, please, could you move it? I've got to go pick my dogs up from the vets. And she was like, yeah, I'll do it in a minute. So I go out, wait in my car, 5 minutes passes, and I'm like, I swear to God, I'm going to kill this bitch. I'm going to kill her. And I get out, I walk in again, and I was like, excuse me, please, I'm in a rush, I need to pick my dogs up. Please, can you just have a little compassion? I apologise for parking in the wrong place. I didn't do it intentionally, I don't want to upset you. And she was going mental. Days on end, literally, it lasted weeks. I really wanted to do something to her car. I was trying to work out ways I could damage her car, like putting nails near her tyres, so when she reversed, they'd pop her tyres, and keying her car. I was just thinking of so many ways I could get back at her, and I finally let go of it, and it was just this strong sense of I want you to pay, you need to suffer, and it's hard to let go of that. I'm a lot better at it nowadays though, because there's no benefit from it. All it does is make me upset, make me feel negative stuff.
Well, and then at the same time, these larger questions, there's not going to be any punishment for it. There's not going to be any responsibility for any of the stuff, whether it's vivisection or slaughtering animals or any of the stuff that we care about as vegans, or the fur industry or all these, surreal and bizarre things. Yeah. But in Cambodia, first mention of Cambodia in this conversation, at the end of the Khmer Rouge period, they signed a treaty that said there would be no trials, there'd be no punishment, there'd be no responsibility for anyone, so that they could have peace at the end of the Civil War. And one of the famous torture houses, one of the centers where people were tortured and executed, a huge number of people, it got made into a museum. And the guys who had done the torture, came to the museum, It's well, that's what happens when there really is no justice, when there really are no trials. Then the people who are literally responsible, the people who with their own hands tortured and murdered the people, show up to see the museum. Oh, I used to work here, So I mean, it's weird, and all these things obviously I'm older than you, but like I remember all the celebration with the end of apartheid in South Africa, and that was also the same thing. It was like, okay, there won't be any trials. There'll just be truth. There'll be no responsibility. There'll be nobody's going to go to jail. We'll just have so-called truth and reconciliation. But anyway, look, that's all I have to say is it's an impossible contradiction we all seem to live with. Because in as much as we really believe this stuff is morally wrong, then we do believe people are individually responsible for it. And I have talked to a couple of former slaughterhouse employees, people involved at different stages of that industry of raising and killing the cows. It was cows specifically who became vegan. The only thing I noted is I could tell from the conversation they were not poor. I'm not saying they were rich, but they had enough money to get out of it.
Yeah. I spoke to a dairy farmer actually when I did my Tinder thing, when I went on Tinder, and spoke to this dairy farmer, and he was the son of, well, his dad was the one who ran the farm, and then his dad ended up suffering a lot from mental health issues. And when I looked into it, I saw a documentary as well about it. The mental health issues are like rife in the farming community. It's really bad, and the suicide as well is really high. Anyway, so he took over from his dad, and like he saw that as the only thing he could do, essentially, because he wanted to help his dad. He wanted to like relieve his stress, and he, from what he told me, like I don't know if it's true, but he was just going on about how much he really did care for the cows, and he had to take the babies away on the day one of their birth, and then he had to send them to slaughter and it was all this, and it was just like I can see the connection there. Like even at that level, I can still see the connection and the cognitive dissonance about it, but it's just so weird. Like when you speak to these people, because it's like they're literally like one step away from just being like, you know what, I know this is wrong, therefore my actions are going to follow suit, and I'm going to stop doing it. But economy plays a lot into it, because he was telling me about how badly it's subsidised and how many of them are in like really bad debt. But he tried to get into the niche market of like high welfare, sandy beaches, like organic cows.
Yeah, you've already heard me rant about that. I hate the fact that the government turns this into a charity. And, it's already bad enough to have it existing as a for-profit industry. But then when it doesn't even make money, when it's taxpayers helping, and,
it's sick. It's so sick.
Yeah, but I mean, I think what you're alluding to there, for me, frankly, since childhood, that was really a concern or even a kind of obsession. Just the concept of necessity. What do people mean when they say something is necessary? Whether it's war or torturing animals to death or just anything else. What do we really mean when we say something is necessary? And
can you think of something that is actually necessary? Like, there's very few things in life that are actually necessary when it comes down to it.
Look, man, human beings, if they'll do anything for money. If they won't do it for money, they'll do it for sex or fame.
And then they'll make sure it's like appears as a necessity.
The guy I talked to, I most remember, I just talked to him on the internet, who was a former, small-scale dairy farmer. And I don't say that to exculpate him. When you're small-scale, you have more to do with the slaughtering and everything. You see every stage. When it's bigger scale, you may just do one stage. But he said that after a few years, he literally looked at the cows and saw dollar signs. Because he would know how much money a different type of cow would be. Or like, oh yeah, that's a $5,000 cow. And he just thought of them in terms of paychecks, and also in terms of how many months, or I don't know, maybe weeks it would be until that money came in. Oh, that's going to be worth $5,000 from now. And that was really how he thought about it. And he said that was thinking of it in that symbolic way actually helped him to not think about them as animals.
Yeah, that's the thing, when people use the humane argument, they can't grasp the logic of this animal is not going to be an animal, they're just an object. Like when money is involved, they're going to be seriously harmed. I mean, look at breeding of dogs, for example. That money's involved, and now they're just completely fucked. Greyhound racing, money's involved, and now they're just completely fucked. Even the creature that we're supposed to love and that's man's best friend, the second money is involved, they're fucked.
Yeah, but I mean, the fucked up thing is too, this seems to be the only topic about which people pretend to care about humaneness. Like, there are people who need to be in prison because they are too dangerous to be in society. It's a small minority of people in prison, but it's the truth. As you go on in life, you will meet people who are a danger every minute they're on the street. Okay? Yeah. Humane prison conditions. That's a real use of the concept of humane. That's not bullshit. To ask, okay, if this guy is going to be in a cell for the rest of his life, is that cell humane or not? I met a guy, this is bizarre, but it's from England, and up in northern England and southern Scotland, he was involved with complaints to get toilets installed in the prisons, because they still had prisons there where the prisoners went to the bathroom in a metal pail. It was like a 200-year-old prison, and it had just never been renovated. So, anyway, I think that's a few years ago, but it's not that many years ago. And he was telling me about that. Like, okay, what are humane prison conditions? Nobody cares. Like, like that's a smaller social movement than veganism. That's like a tiny. It's only like the wives of prisoners who give a fuck, and nobody else cares. But this fur coat is humane, and like I know it's humane because it was made in Sweden. And, like, the Swedes are so morally superior to the Russians. Like, well, it was from Russia, it might not be humane, So, the humane excuse and the links to nationalism and luxury, because the humane meat is the more expensive meat, so it's the higher status meat. But, like, shit, like, what the fuck else in your life is humane? Like, is there any other... Anyway, sorry, I don't mean you, I just mean, people in general. Like, what... Anyway, why is it that this is the only issue that humaneness comes up in? I like, it's a really good question. I don't know, the weapons of war. Are we using humane methods of bombing civilians? To me, it's a meaningful question. No, but there's absolutely no public interest in that. Anyway.
Yeah, because we don't really first-hand benefit from it. I learned first-hand the difference between the free-range lie, because when I went to rescue those chickens, it was in a free-range farm. And literally, the second I walked into that barn, it all just hit me. I was like, right, okay, free range is a lie. Even though I'm vegan, there literally is no free range.
Yeah, I think it was... So on my blog, though, I had a photo of the best free range conditions in Europe under the standard. It's from Holland, somewhere in the Netherlands. Yeah. And it was like the single most popular image I ever posted. I added like a slogan, I added some text, but it was just a photo of that. And it's like, it's true, it's not as bad, but it's fucking unbelievably horrible. And this was EU standards and the highest standard within Europe for free range. Yeah.
It's just horrible. Every aspect of it is just disgusting. And then I also noticed the mentality of the workers. Like, this was a small scale guy. I say small scale. He had 6,000 chickens, and his sons were working for him, kind of obviously going to take over the business, whatever. And their attitudes were just appalling. Like, their sons, teenage boys, were kicking the crap out of chickens, just kicking them, grabbing them, slamming them, grabbing them by the neck, slamming them, laughing at them. And it's just it was just such a sick mentality. And I remember speaking to my brother and being like, this is horrible. I broke down in tears. But it was really easy to understand the mentality and how it's been taught to us. And I don't get as angry when I think about how brainwashed people are, because I do understand how easy it is to ingrain it into them, especially when it's your parents doing it.
So there's a lot I could say just about chickens, but once for 10 seconds, I saw a genuinely wild chicken come out of the jungle. So, I don't know if it was actually wild or fair, if its ancestors had escaped from a farm, or you don't know. But these were chickens that had reverted to their natural behaviors. And, it was a mother chicken being followed by her chicks. And all those behaviors were there, all the intelligence and how it looked around. And, it's defending its young, and it's looking for predators, and it's looking at you, and the shrewdness in the eyes and the quickness. And they're pretty scary. I just say they're, like turkeys in the wild. I don't know if you know this, but, for the United States, that was the official proposal, was instead of the bald eagle, was to make the wild turkey the national symbol of the United States. Because at that time, people respected the turkey. They didn't think of it as a stupid animal. They thought it was a tough, it was an animal that wouldn't stand down. Like, if you got into a fight, it would fight a fully grown man in the forest to defend its young or its territory or whatever. They were respected because people still knew what they were like in the wild. But in Laos, where I also saw chickens being raised in Cambodia. I saw different conditions. But in Laos, I saw chickens that could really be described as free range because it's just like a garden that they run around. So they're not wild, but they have more of those behaviors. And, the level of intelligence and all the stuff they're doing. And they hunt insects like grasshoppers, and they compete with one another socially. And there's all this stuff going on in the chicken yard. There's all the kind of politics of, of their social unit. And, the human beings who would kill them out there, they were cowards. And I remember they killed a chicken through the most gradual form imaginable, which was they and this was normal for them. They took a chicken and they put it in a noose, the same way you'd hang a human being in a noose, and hung it from a tree. And that chicken took hours and hours to die because, for one thing, a chicken is just not that heavy. I mean, a human being, I think, dies pretty quickly that way. And for another thing, in case you didn't know, a chicken has wings. So it was pathetically flapping its wings to try to help itself to breathe. And the two things that were striking about that was that the human beings were all looking away. They were not, they were intentionally not looking at the chicken. But the other chickens were also. The other chickens knew what was going on and were aware of it. They'd probably seen it before. And it's the most amazing thing, because chickens, they move their heads around really quickly, and they're all, angled away from. They're all looking away from this unbelievably gory spectacle of this chicken being killed in this way. I did not know the word coward in the Lao language. I'm semi-crying on camera. I did not know the word coward in the Lao language, and I still don't know the word. But I did speak to them in Lao, in the local language, and asked them, what they were doing and why they didn't. And again, I know the word humane you can't apply, but why they didn't have the decency to at least, cut the chicken's head off, to at least kill it rapidly. And they didn't. Let me tell you something. Free range. I don't know. You want to go? You want to change the topic? What do you want?
I just want to brush the tears off my face.
Yeah. It's funny, the stuff that gets to me now. I think, though, probably what emotionally gets to me the most is when there's hope, is when there are things that play on your hope for change. Like I mentioned in a recent video, watching the protest footage from Japan, that was weird that affected me so emotionally, because it's just people having a protest. But, I live with the hopelessness every day. It's only once in a while that you get that feeling of hope. You get something that excites the other side of your character. So, and that tends to emotionally really impact me more. Anyway, I say all this partly because I really do encounter the idea that as long as it's a small farm, as long as it's locally raised, as long as it's whatever, and it's like, don't tell me about small farms, and don't, anyway. Yeah. Actually, I'll just mention this because it may actually be useful for my viewers. But when I've talked to meat eaters about that face to face, I mean, on this channel, I only talk to vegans. But one of the things I've said is this may be useful when you're actually talking to people. If you want an operation, do you assume that a local hospital is better than a hospital in a big city? Do you assume that the closest hospital to you is ethically better or technically better than the biggest hospital in Paris? Why would it be better? Who has the best techniques? So, it may sound ridiculous, but as a starter for the conversation, as opposed to telling someone you think they're a scumbag, I actually find that does get them thinking, where it's like, well, what are the assumptions? Why would a local farm be better than one far away? And what am I imagining is the difference technologically or morally between locally slaughtered meat and something from somewhere else? All right. Final question. Question number 5. One of the things that's unusual about your channel in 2016 is that you're choosing to live a normal life with a real job, and you don't seem to be trying to escape from your normal life and your real job. You seem to be in the minority of people who are not trying to sell a diet book, not trying to sell a pin-up calendar, not trying to make money from your own body or appearance. I wonder if you have friends or fans who are encouraging you to put on a bikini, to start filming holiday videos, yoga videos, and imitate the success of other YouTubers. This is lifestyle activism versus political activism. If it's something you've never considered, I'd find that interesting too. But it seems like there's some sort of pressure, or maybe just financial temptation, for any young woman who is slim, athletic, etc., to try to make money through lifestyle activism, or by making their own beauty into a sort of cinema that the audience can participate in through videos, Instagram, etc. So,
I think the first thing I should say is that the way I've been brought up, and because of who my father is, and like because of the culture I have, that kind of the kind of selling my body aspect of like making money, etc., or whatever, I literally just can't do that. Like it hasn't been instilled into me that that's acceptable. So I would never feel comfortable doing that. So that kind of rules out that side of things. Instagram and like social media and doing that kind of thing, I can't do either, just because I literally hate them. Like I hate most social media. The only thing I have is YouTube and Twitter. The only reason I have those two is because that's how I that's how I use my platform to talk about veganism. Would I like to not have them? Yes. I don't particularly like having my life out for a certain amount of people to see. That's not who I am. I really dislike it. It makes me very uncomfortable. And I'm trying to get over that at the moment because I've not been making videos. But I think it's just part of who I am and how I've grown up, that this is how to make a safe and like stable life. You have a certain job, you have a stable job, one that hopefully you enjoy, and that's like the idea of doing something like what Freely does, and a lot of the kind of the young girls that are my age on YouTube, etc., and Instagram, whatever. That doesn't appeal to me whatsoever. Very few people have said things like there's a small amount of people that have said, oh, you should do like workout videos or like yoga or whatever it is. And I don't actually mind doing that to a certain extent, but it is just going to be over sexualized because I'm female and I'm going to be in gym clothes, and it doesn't appeal to me. But at the same time, I can actually help other women with kind of how to achieve a certain body type or how to achieve a certain look, and I can show people that it's possible to do while being vegan. I understand that, but it's just too much of a contradiction of like who I am as a person. I can't do that.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, like, even within your channel, which basically contains nothing sexy, like, you have a couple of videos just about hair care, about like how to grow long hair, which is like a beauty topic, you know, and then those get, you know, way more views than the views on vegan. So like, even there, for a lot of people, that alone would be enough to say, oh, this is the direction I've got to go. You know what I mean? Like, that would be a stimulus. That would be a direction to say, okay, if I want 100,000 followers, it's got to be hair or whatever it is.
It's really annoying. Like, I hate doing those. I hate it. And you can tell in my voice as well. It's like quite clear. But I am aware that that's what spreads the message a lot further. So that's why I've done one or two. But it makes me really uncomfortable. Like, really, really uncomfortable. It's not appealing to me. I can't stand the idea of, like, people say to me, oh, like, how did you grow your hair so long, and how have you done this? And I don't have an answer. The answer is I've just left it alone. A, genetically, I'm just that's the genes I've got, and B, I don't mess around with my hair. I don't dye it. I don't like straighten it, curl it, etc. I just leave it alone, and that's what's happened. I'm lazy. I don't particularly like going to the hairdressers. I don't like having my hair yanked and pulled and like blow dried. So that's just what's happened from it, and then everyone sees it as like this thing that, like, I must have some magical cure, and I should tell them about what hair care I use, and etc. Yeah. So I've kind of I have abused that a little and used it to get people coming to my channel so they can be exposed to what vegan is. But it just goes against everything inside of me. It's really annoying. That the entire kind of veganism thing goes against so much of who I am. I'm an extremely private person, and yet I have to be public. I'd like to think I'm not very materialistic and I'm not kind of obsessed with how I look, but I have to be. So it's really annoying. But I don't know. I think obviously it's beneficial.
But anyway, I mean, it is interesting. Like, to some extent, these things are just differences in character, and to some extent, they're a choice. But, like, it blows my mind that I really do get people writing into me and contacting me in different ways who want my channel to be, like, about, like, beauty and fitness and, like, you know, the usual thing for vegans. And, like, I'm not saying I can't do it, but I wouldn't be the best channel. I wouldn't be in the top 1,000 channels. I would be one of the worst channels. Like, you really want my channel to be giving you, like, diet, beauty, fitness, like, cooking. But, like, actually, you know what? Nobody has asked me for cooking advice. So there you go. No, but, like, you know, hey, you want to see Eisel goes to the gym or something? Like,
Why not?
No, but that, you know, that blows my mind that people want that content and put that expectation on me.
I think it's just this want to, like, live through someone else's life. It's just like this want to, like, live vicariously through someone else. They want to see you do, like, cooking and like shopping and boyfriends and girlfriends and all. It's just this want to, like, experience. That's why reality TV shows are so popular, because we're just so obsessed with everything other than our own lives. We just want to, like, aspire to, like, someone else.
Yeah.
I've noticed that as well with really small YouTubers. Like, people genuinely feel like they're celebrities. Genuinely.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I don't think the word sex is evil or bad. Like, I don't regard sex as a dirty word. But it is interesting to me also that veganism, there's this kind of contradiction, because everything's about sex, everything's about sexuality and certain kind of sexualized image, and yet people are also really stuck on pretending that nothing is. And, you know, I had some email back and forth with Tess Begg, who you may or may not know, but she is a very young female YouTuber. She dropped out of high school to do YouTube full time. She didn't drop out of college, she dropped out of high school, so I don't know her age. And, you know, like I just mentioned in passing, like, this is another example of someone, you know, in veganism who is, you know, trying to capitalize on their sexuality and, you know, doing this combination of fitness and food videos and what have you. But, you know, what I said about her was not insulting, and in the email back and forth to her, I made that clear. I was like, look, I'm not saying anything bad about you. I'm just talking about what's going on with veganism on the internet and what the future is for this stuff. But, like, the sexual aspect, it is an aspect of how the whole thing is commodified, and in some strange sense, like, it's an aspect of why heterosexual females watch other heterosexual females on YouTube. You know, like, somehow this sense of I don't know, I guess it's people who want to see, like straight women who want to see another straight woman whose life seems to have no problems in it, you know, who seems to be, you know, financially and personally, who just seems to be living a wonderful life. I don't get it at all. Like, you know, I only want to see the struggle. You know what I mean? If someone has a YouTube channel where they talk about how hard their life is, wherever they are, whether they're in New York City or London or Thailand, if someone's talking about, you know, what's hard and what's real, but that's even like rap music. Why do I listen to Wu-Tang Clan? Do Wu-Tang Clan even have one song about how wonderful life is? Mm-hmm. Seriously, their whole catalog is about how life is a miserable struggle. You know, they're still rapping about how they just got out of jail, even though they got out of jail 25 years ago. You know, so yeah, that's partly characteristic. But yeah, everything is about sex. No one can admit that it's about sex. And at the same time, we still have these witch hunts going on. You know, Durian Ryder is currently threatening to beat up another guy and so on. And even back with the Joe Best thing, which is now about a year ago, like, I wasn't slamming, I wasn't saying Joe Best is a terrible person. I examined, I talked about different aspects of it. But it's just like, you know, you have situations where, you know, grown adults are paying to share a hotel room together and then coming on the internet and making it's weird. There's some kind of still, like, Catholicizing element in veganism where, I don't know, I guess it's like the X-Men comic books. You know, like in the X-Men comic books, all the characters are, like, naked. They're basically wearing body paint. They're wearing skin-tight clothes that are impossibly revealing. And yet this is children's entertainment, and nobody really has sex, and everything is supposed to be, you know, it's... Yeah. I guess that's what it is. I guess in some sense these people want to be superheroes, and they want to symbolize vitality and strength and power and beauty and sexuality. You know, I don't know, like the X-Men or like any other superhero. And yet, you know, we're supposed to pretend that's not what's on the table. That's not what's going on. Sorry, I should have phrased my rant in the form of a question.
No, I enjoy it.
Yeah. Anyway, look, I'm still a reckless optimist because I like to think that the type of vegans who are on YouTube are still only a minority. And, you know, actually the only reason I have to be hopeful are the emails I get from my own viewers. But I get emails from vegans who are normal people, who want to lead real lives, who want to make a positive difference in society. You know, and not just through veganism. They're doing other meaningful things in their lives. And they write in to tell me how much it means to them to have somebody on YouTube who is not selling that dream. So
yeah, that's why I didn't monetize my videos. Also, like, firstly because I don't need the money, and then secondly because I hate the idea of like someone having the control over what's featured on my channel. This is mine. I'm not here to sell anything. I don't want you to have to like click skip ad and all that bullshit and see an ad of like McDonald's or whatever. I just don't want it like stay off my channel. So that's why I didn't monetize my videos, and that's also why I try to be myself. I've noticed that people really don't like me and who I actually am as a person. Like, they find me really depressing, like callous, rude. But that's me. That's my humor. Like, obviously, it's like an acquired taste. So I would be better off if I kind of put on this really fake, happy, like laugh and smile and got myself like a pretty boyfriend with a 6-pack. But I just can't do it. It's not funny.
Yeah. Oh well. I mean, I think the other question is like, if you did monetize, does it then influence you? Because again, you see those kinds of things. Oh, I get way more viewers if it's about hair. I get way more viewers if I'm wearing a bra or whatever it is, you know. Yeah. And then all that stuff plays into it.
Sometimes I've taken advantage of that. Like that's why I've done my hair videos and stuff. But I think it just takes a certain type of person. But then I could be wrong. Like, anyone could be kind of sucked into that if they needed it badly enough.
Can I'll ask a question, because I actually have an answer to this. Can you remember the first vegan YouTuber you saw? Like the first person who was, you know, like not the first video on YouTube, but the first person who had a channel talking about veganism, you know?
Really. That's how I was watching Jenna Marbles all the time. I kind of got into the YouTube scene and I was like, oh, this is really cool. She's really funny. Like, I really liked her.
And I remember she was semi-vegan before she became vegan. I remember that, yeah.
So she mentioned it. I was like, what the fuck is she even talking about? I don't care. Just I left it. And then this video popped up on the side that was Freely's video saying, oh, Jenna Marbles has gained weight. So I was like, what the fuck? Who do you think you are saying something like that? So I clicked on the video, watched it. And my thoughts were like, oh, okay, fair play. You're a bit of a dickhead. I don't like you. Like, I don't like watching your videos. And then another video came up that was the speech, and it said the most important speech you'll ever hear, whatever. I had no idea it was anything to do with veganism. It completely took me out of like my comfort zone. I had no idea what I was watching, and then it kind of clicked after 2 minutes what he was going to talk about. So I paused it and I kind of braced myself, and I was like, Zahria, whatever you do not let this person convert you. Like, just listen, and just like be open-minded, but don't let them like convert you into this kind of cult. And after the speech was over, it was the weirdest feeling, just like everything in my world had just been turned upside down. So Freely technically was what kind of got me into veganism. She was the first YouTuber I ever saw who I recognised as vegan.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting, you know, I have a background in the theatre that's been mentioned like really briefly on this channel, but I think it's for that reason that what I look for in YouTube is not theatrical. You know what I mean? Like, I just have this sense of like, look, I know what a movie is. I know what a drama is. And that's not what YouTube is good at. Like, I want to see people just talk about their real life. You know, like, and I don't need special effects. I don't need intro. I just need real talk about real life. And that's cool. Like, I always say, like, my channel, I think of it as being like meeting me in a cafe and talking to me in a cafe. And there's nothing else to it. But, you know, the first vegan YouTuber I saw, I can remember, her screen name is Shelly123. So I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's about 5 years ago. She was popular at the time, and she only uploaded videos for a few months and then stopped, probably because she has a real life and a real job. Mm-hmm. But I remember, you know, and no, she's like a good-looking woman. but it's not about the fact that she's a good-looking woman. She just happens to be a good-looking woman talking about veganism, you know. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, but I mean, that was the first vegan YouTuber I ever saw, and that just made sense to me. Like, you know, if you're vegan and you're ugly, fine. If you're vegan, you're good-looking, fine. But like, who cares? You know, like how are you going to compete with Cosmopolitan magazine and Playboy magazine? And like it never seemed to me natural that if you want to address veganism, the way to do it is by being the prettiest or the nakedest or the most, you know what I mean? Like to have sort of the best packaging. And anyway, it's funny though, that just left impression me. And then like it probably was a couple of years later that I saw Freely. Like you know what I mean? It just her anyway, whatever, for whatever reason. And you know, I didn't hate Freely, and I still don't hate Freely. I don't have any strong. Yeah, but you know, it just didn't seem to me like necessary or inevitable. Like, and I still don't see, like, you know, veganism. It doesn't really have anything to do with yoga. If you like yoga, that's fine, but like they're not the same thing. Veganism doesn't really have anything to do with bicycles. If you like bicycles, that's fine, but that's the same thing. And it doesn't really have anything to do with beauty. But anyway, that's the way it's turned out in 2016, and who knows?
And it just annoys me that it still annoys me that we have an actual word for just not like causing a lot of harm. Just the idea that we obviously we have to have the label because that's how we're going to distinguish things and that's how we're going to etc. But it's just such an uncomfortable prospect that we genuinely need a phrase, we need a word, we need a philosophy, like to say let's not harm. Like, I believe in not harming. What's the thing? Like to cause the least amount of harm, like practically and practicable and whatever. Yeah. It's just annoying. It just really irritates me. It's really sickening. But it just shows exactly what like type of culture we're in.
Yeah, I feel you, but that's the only way I find other vegans is because we have this handle, right? We have this thing, and if we didn't, I mean, you know.
It's just like this flag that we have to hold up to say, "Hey, I'm one of you. Like I understand that this is wrong, therefore I don't support it."
Well, right, and then the other crazy thing is, as soon as you meet other people under that flag, you realize you have like nothing else in common with them, or 98% of them. Like that's the other big shock, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, but I've made the mistake of assuming these people are like me and they're genuine.
Right. I can't say everyone goes through that, but a lot of people go through that.
I've met some amazing people though. Like, I do end up meeting people that are similar to me and are like people that I genuinely think I'll be friends with for a long time. But again, you do meet those people that are just it's bad.
It matters though. I mean, each one of those people matters. I don't know if you heard me because it was way back on my YouTube channel. But I've said, like, if I knew 5 decent human beings who were Buddhists, who were, like, really involved with Buddhism, I would have stayed a Buddhist because of those 5 people. And I didn't. At the end of my time with that religion, it was like I've been all over the world, met all these people, and, like, there's not even one person in my life who I respect, you know, who I really regard as a good, solid person who's part of this religion. So, you know, it was easy to quit. But no, I think it really does matter. I mean, again, whether it's 5 people or 3 people or what, you know.
I think I've just developed like a solid group of friends, like cyber friends essentially, because I've only met a few of them, but they're just like some amazing people.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that's the positive side of talking about the long term, though, because before we were kind of saying, you know, the emotional effects of this over 5 years or 10 years. But I mean, if you can build up a little bit of a social network, then that's something that's really positive over 5 years and 10 years. Because 5 years from now, you will have known those people for 5 years.
It is odd though, because I felt closer to this group of people, like more so than I ever felt close to anyone, to be honest. Because I've had friends, and then it's just kind of not. I don't know. I can't even explain it. Just it's almost like I outgrow them. Or essentially you just go in different directions, or someone just doesn't seem to have much to them apart from like the shallowness. Or it's essentially like that. Like one of my first best friends was just like obviously going down a really bad path, and I didn't really want to follow that path, so that kind of ended. And my second, who I'd class as a best friend, was just really shallow, and it turned out that they were like always going to be like that, and there was nothing I could do about it. Like that was it. So it was really nice and really kind of refreshing to meet people that weren't so self-obsessed. Although people that call them plant-based, people that call themselves plant-based or that vegan for health reasons, I've noticed that I just really dislike those people. Like they're all the same kind of. They're the people that I don't want to be friends with. They're kind of selfish, self-obsessed, materialistic.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting thing because the vegan for health reasons, it can be a gateway to being an ethical vegan. But when it isn't, then who are those people, right? Like, like it's kind of like, well, what kind of scumbag are you if you're already vegan, but you're still not vegan? You know what I mean? You still can't take that step. You still can't take the ethical step even when it costs you nothing. Well, the really, really short anecdote, when I was in Montreal, which is one of our big cities in Canada, I sat down at a vegan restaurant, and there were these two old men, over 60, but not like 90, but over 60 years old. And these two old guys, like a lot of old people, they were speaking a little bit too loudly, probably because their hearing was bad. And they were saying to the waitress, "Now, does that have butter in it? I can't have butter on my doctor's." The waitress was saying, "It's vegan. The whole restaurant is vegan. Nothing is butter." These were two guys who were on a vegan diet. But for them, it was literally a vegan diet. Like, that's it. It was completely morally hollow. And even when they're sitting in a vegan restaurant talking to the waitress, they still don't know what veganism is or why it matters. So from my perspective, like, Bill Clinton is the ultimate example of that. And as soon as he lost the weight, he went back to eating meat. He went on a first excuse. He went on a paleo diet.
Apparently he's still vegan. Apparently.
That'll be interesting if it's true, because he said
some comedian had a sit down with Hillary Clinton, and they're saying it. So your husband's vegan, and she was like, and they were like, oh, is he a smug vegan? They were trying to make a joke, and she was like, no, yeah, he is, and he doesn't push it on me, and whatever. So hopefully it's true. Hopefully he is still vegan, but I don't know.
Anyway, look, I don't know. We got to wrap the conversation up sometime. I don't know if you have any particular questions for me, or it's stuff. It was like the first topic we talked about. This stuff is emotionally draining. It does have a kind of harrowing, a harrowing, character-changing aspect to it. And the
saddest thing is as well, like you can't just go home and forget it. It's just always there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for everyone, you can say that suffering changes you in ways that you can't anticipate. There are things you can predict in life. We can know in the future. Like, I'm going to go to China now. I'm going to try to learn Chinese. I can think about how that's going to change me, how I'm going to be a different person when I come back, if I come back. I can think about how it's going to change me intellectually, emotionally, professionally. But suffering, you really do not know how it's going to change you. But I think one of the differences is in life, are you talking to people who only change when it's their own suffering, when it's them in prison, when it's them in the torture chamber or whatever? Or are you talking to people who can actually learn from the suffering of others? I learn from the suffering of people who died 100 years ago in history, like just from studying, where I have no connection to it. It has nothing to do with me. But investing yourself in that intellectually and emotionally, you do suffer. You do suffer in studying political history, or I do at least. Suffering is a part of learning, for me at least.
It's biologically necessary as well, because empathy is what helps us survive, what helps us help our species.
Well, I think as soon as you recognize the suffering of animals as being, more than zero, because again, like you said earlier, you don't need to be an animal lover. You don't need to like dogs, but just as soon as it's worth more than nothing, as soon as it's any number other than zero, then you've extended that sense of suffering and of suffering with others and being changed by suffering exponentially. The very first time I talked to you, actually, you had just gotten back from China. You have some connection to China in your life, right? Yeah. So just wondering, why did you go? Because I'm now going back, right?
It was for business. The reason I went in October.
Yeah. Do you have interest in the future, or no? It was one trip to China, and you never want to go back?
I don't want to go back.
What?
I'd rather gouge my eyes out.
Oh, no kidding. Any particular reason?
The pollution was horrific,
Yeah.
like so bad.
Yep.
It just wasn't a nice place. But I'm sure there's like lovely places in China, but I didn't see a single insect, didn't see a single bird. Literally, why did you find that funny? That's not amusing.
China, these are not its strong suits. But the funny thing is, like, I was living out in the areas that are supposedly have more intact nature and so on, and it's still like really bleak. And you know, I had professors saying to me, so I'm going, Yunnan, it's considered a remote area, but like, you know, there were more people living in one city in Yunnan than in a whole province in Canada. Like, you know, people say something is a small town when it has 10 million people. And I had several professors say to me, oh, well, that's good you're going to Yunnan because like the air pollution won't be so bad. And every time I would just show them, like, here's the chart. You know, the air pollution is not as bad as Beijing. However, by United Nations standards, it's not fit for human habitation. It's like, you know, it's
like crap. That felt horrible.
It's actually off the chart. Like, it's, you know, it's not within the bounds of what human beings should live in. And, you know, the other thing that's funny about that, this is both in Taiwan and in China. In Taiwan, they get the pollution from China. The same clouds just continue over. But whenever you talk to people and they'd mention to you like a good place to live because the air pollution was better, when you looked into it, it was never true. Or it was like, you know, it was like a 2% difference. It was like, you know, there are these local justifications like, oh, you know, there were some trees over there. So, you know, the climate's better.
I saw a bird 10 years ago.
Yeah. And all the wild species there are, you know, in between endangered and extinct. I was interested in elephants. You've probably heard me mention that. Simply like, you know, I think everyone's interested in elephants to some extent. But you know, they have like this one park the size of a parking lot for wild elephants. And I remember talking to people. It's like, you know, how do you define the word wild? It's like they don't actually feed themselves. Like, I realize they don't perform tricks. Like, that's significant. They're not, but like, these are, and they have like a little bit of space to walk, so they're not in a cage, but like, you know, they are fed by human beings every day. Like, this is just a better quality of zoo than most of China has. And those elephants there, you know, the Chinese hospitals get a bad reputation. But there was a white man decided to climb over the barrier to get some better photographs of the elephants up close. And in terms of something I've been talking about a lot in my channel, the difference between domesticated and wild species, one of the adult male elephants demonstrated just how well it could use its tusks in concert with its trunk. It lifted him off the ground, impaled him, and removed his entire long intestines from his abdomen, so that that part of his body. Yeah, and you think about that, and it's like, this elephant didn't have practice. You know, it's like, this was its first attempt at disemboweling a human being, and you know, it did this flawlessly. But so, you know, when I read this, I say I'm interested in elephants. I think most vegans have some interest. Then what was amazing with the follow-up stories, the guy survived. At the hospital, they just put all the organs back into him and sewed him up. I thought, wow, you know what? Like, you know, the Chinese hospitals, they've got at least a couple of talented surgeons, because, you know,
it's not a hard job. You just ram it back in. They do that, I swear, when you have a cesarean, that's what they do.
Oh yeah? They just rummage it all back in?
They take the organs out, put them on a table next to you, and then take the baby out.
Yeah. You know, that's the sort of thing that I'm certain there are videos of on YouTube, and I'm never going to watch. So, yeah, talk about self-censorship. Talk about living...